Ripple is now a founding member of TRM Labs Beacon Network, a real-time crypto crime response system that lets regulators, exchanges, and banks track stolen funds instantly and stop them before criminals cash out. That's the exact tool governments have been screaming for, and Ripple just delivered it. At the same time, Gemini, the same exchange that ignored XRP for years, just flipped. Not only are they teasing a massive XRP rewards program, but Ripple literally funded Gemini with a loan in Bitcoin as they prepare for an IPO. Ripple and Gemini? Linked, and XRP is suddenly front and center. And then came the real shocker. The first US IPO proceeds ever settled on a blockchain, done on the XRP ledger in Ripple stablecoin Relust. $1.15 billion. A historic first. Wall Street money flowing directly through Ripple's rails. 3 bombshells, back to back, all pointing to one thing. XRP isn't waiting for adoption anymore. Adoption has started. This isn't speculation. This isn't someday. This is happening now. The floodgates for XRP utility are wide open, and the institutions are walking straight through. So buckle up, because in this video we're breaking down how Ripple just outmaneuvered the SEC, flipped its biggest critics into allies, and dragged IPO settlement into the blockchain era. But first, smash that subscribe button for Be Crypto Smart, because if you're not tracking these institutional moves in XRP, XLM, HBAR, and beyond, you're already falling behind. The bombshell has dropped. The floodgates are open. Let's break it down. This isn't a routine announcement. This is the launch of the first real-time crypto crime response system, a network built to solve the single biggest argument regulators and banks have used against digital assets. That crypto is too dangerous because of hacks, scams, and illicit finance. For years, the same criticism has been recycled. Crypto can't go mainstream because it fuels crime. Every DeFi exploit, every exchange hack, every wallet drain has reinforced that narrative. Billions stolen, billions laundered through mixers and decentralized swaps, with no way to stop it. Beacon flips that script. It allows stolen funds to be tracked instantly and stopped before they ever leave the blockchain. Instead of victims watching helplessly, there's now a framework to flag, trace, alert, and act in real time. That changes everything. And Ripple isn't just participating. They're a founding member. They're not standing on the sidelines waiting for others to build this. They're helping design the very system that regulators and institutions will lean on when they decide which networks they can trust. The bigger picture. Look at who else is tied into TRM Labs. It's not just exchanges and crypto startups. It's global banking infrastructure. One of the key partners here is Canton Network. Canton is the backbone for some of the largest financial players in the world: Bank of America, Barclays, Citi, BNP Paribas, Bank of China. They move trillions through their systems every month. This isn't retail-level activity. This is wholesale finance at scale. By entering Beacon, Ripple positions XRP directly inside the compliance networks that connect to these institutions. That's not chance. That's execution. Why this matters for XRP. Ripple's strategy has always been about the long game. While other projects chase hype cycles, Ripple has focused on embedding XRP into the rails of traditional finance. Beacon takes that one step further. Now, instead of being framed as the risky asset, XRP is tied to the very network that law enforcement and regulators will point to as proof that crypto can be secured and monitored at scale. This isn't about publicity. It's about trust. Beacon creates the conditions for real institutional adoption, and Ripple has put itself at the center of it. Ripple didn't just join Beacon. They aligned XRP with the very solution regulators have been demanding. That shifts the conversation entirely. From crypto crime is unstoppable to Ripple is solving it. Gemini flipping on XRP might be one of the clearest signs yet that the tide has turned. For years, the Winklevoss twins dismissed XRP outright. They leaned hard into Bitcoin and Ethereum and left XRP off their platform even when every other major US exchange already had it listed. It wasn't an accident, it was a stance. Gemini positioned itself as the serious exchange for BTC and ETH while treating XRP as if it didn't belong. Then, in August 2023, that wall finally cracked. A judge ruled XRP was not a security, and suddenly Gemini listed it. But what started as a reluctant listing has now become a full-on push. The teaser that set off the community. In August 2025, Gemini posted one line on X: "The next era of rewards is preparing to launch." But the catch was in the lettering. The capitalized letters spelled out XRP. That was no accident. That was a deliberate signal. Instantly, speculation exploded. Was Gemini preparing an XRP staking program? An XRP reward system? Some kind of yield-bearing product? And this wasn't their first move. Gemini had already run multiple XRP-focused promotions: an XRP cashback credit card, faucet-style XRP giveaways, sweepstakes, and community reward campaigns. For an exchange that refused to even touch XRP for nearly a decade, the turnaround was staggering. From ignoring XRP to actively building campaigns around it, Gemini's position has shifted from opposition to promotion. The Ripple funding connection. Then came the real revelation. Ripple isn't just watching Gemini's pivot, they're financing it. In 2025, Ripple provided Gemini with a loan of 1,275 Bitcoin, worth tens of millions, at an interest rate of 4.3%. This wasn't paid in XRP, which makes it even more strategic. Ripple is leveraging Bitcoin, the asset Gemini has always respected, to establish financial ties. And what's Gemini doing with this? Preparing for an IPO. So now the picture sharpens. Gemini, once a vocal non-supporter of XRP, is preparing to go public. Ripple, a company tied to XRP's long-term utility, is financially supporting them. At the same time, Gemini is teasing XRP-based programs and building campaigns around the token. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. Why this pivot matters. When an exchange as established as Gemini does a 180 on XRP, it forces a simple question. What do they know? These aren't influencers tweeting speculation. Gemini is a US-regulated exchange run by insiders who understand the regulatory and institutional wins. If they're willing to attach XRP to their brand, build programs around it, and take direct support from Ripple, it suggests that behind the scenes, the position of XRP has fundamentally changed. The same exchange that mocked XRP for years is now signaling it as part of their growth strategy. That's not a small pivot, that's a major tell. The IPO bombshell. Stablecoins on the XRP ledger. This is the move that nobody saw coming, and it might be the most important one yet. For the first time in US history, proceeds from an IPO were settled on a blockchain. And not just any blockchain, it happened on the XRP ledger using Ripple's stablecoin Relust. That's a historic milestone. IPOs are the most conservative, compliance-heavy capital market process in the world. They're controlled by Wall Street banks, monitored by regulators, and locked into legacy systems that haven't changed for decades. And now, for the first time, blockchain settlement just broke through that wall with Ripple at the center of it. Why it's different. Plenty of crypto projects brag about adoption. Most of it ends up being experiments, pilots, or limited tests that never scale. But this wasn't a sandbox. This was a real IPO. A company called Bullish raised billions, and $1.15 billion of those proceeds were settled directly in Relust. That matters for two reasons. It proves stablecoins can handle real institutional money in the most regulated financial environments. It puts the XRP ledger at the heart of one of Wall Street's most important processes, raising capital from the public. This isn't retail speculation. This is Ripple's stablecoin being used in an environment where compliance isn't optional. It's law. The message from Ripple. Jack McDonald, Ripple's head of stablecoins, didn't downplay it. He said flat out, Relust is becoming the gold standard in compliance. It's already being used as collateral. It's already handling settlements. And now it's tied to IPO funding. His words were simple. The floodgates are opening. That isn't marketing talk. Ripple executives choose their words carefully. When they say the floodgates are opening, it means they're seeing a pipeline of adoption building behind the scenes. Why this is a turning point. IPOs are not small events. They're multi-billion-dollar transactions involving the biggest banks and regulators in the world. If a portion of those proceeds can be settled in a Ripple-issued stablecoin on the XRP ledger, it sets a precedent every other exchange and bank can point to. Tomorrow, Another IPO could settle part of its proceeds in Relust, then another, then bond offerings, then large-scale corporate financing. This is how adoption spreads, not with hype, but with precedent. And the precedent is clear. If Ripple stablecoin can handle IPO settlements, it can handle anything. The strategic advantage. Ripple's long game has always been about one thing: building trust with institutions. With Beacon, they tackled compliance and crime. With Gemini, they tied XRP into US exchange infrastructure. And now with Relust, they've pushed XRP ledger settlement directly into the most conservative corner of finance. That combination is lethal. Regulators can't say crypto is unsafe when Ripple is building crime prevention rails. Exchanges can't say XRP has no role when they're running promotions with it. And Wall Street can't say blockchain has no place in capital markets when IPO proceeds are already being settled on the XRP ledger. This isn't about speculation anymore. This is adoption, and it's happening at the highest levels of finance. Why this really means the floodgates are opening. Step back for a second and look at the sequence. Ripple didn't just make random announcements. They hit 3 choke points in global finance back to back. Beacon Network, they solved the compliance argument regulators have used to keep crypto at arm's length. Crypto crime? Ripple just built the response system. Gemini, they tied XRP into US exchange infrastructure. An exchange that once mocked XRP is now running campaigns and even taking Ripple's financial backing ahead of its IPO. IPO settlement, they forced blockchain into one of the most conservative processes in finance. A public offering, billions raised, settled partly on the XRP ledger with Ripple stablecoin. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. And here's the bigger point. None of these moves are about chasing retail hype. They're about building infrastructure. Infrastructure is boring to most people. It's not a flashy price chart, but it's the foundation that decides which assets survive and which assets vanish. And right now, Ripple is embedding XRP into the plumbing of global finance at every level. At the regulatory level, Beacon makes crypto safer. At the exchange level, Gemini puts XRP in front of millions of US users. At the capital markets level, IPO settlements prove XRP ledger can handle institutional money flows. This is why Ripple has survived everything thrown at it. Years of lawsuits, regulatory delays, critics writing XRP off as dead. None of it stopped them because the strategy was never about hype. It was about positioning. When the infrastructure is ready, when regulators stop resisting, when banks need settlement rails that actually work at scale, Ripple is already there. XRP is already integrated. The floodgates aren't opening because of a retail pump. They're opening because the pipes of finance are being rebuilt and XRP is being welded into the system itself. That's why the noise around Ripple never really mattered. While others were chasing narratives, Ripple was building the rails. And now those rails are being tested, adopted, and expanded. The floodgates aren't coming. They're here. And XRP is flowing straight through them. What this means for XRP holders. So let's cut to the point. What does all of this mean if you're holding XRP today? It means the entire narrative has flipped. For years, XRP was branded as the lawsuit coin. Traders called it dead money. Exchanges delisted it. Institutions kept their distance. Every headline was about the SEC, not adoption. That's over. XRP is no longer defined by the courtroom. It's now tied to IPOs, to US exchanges, and to global compliance networks. The stigma is gone. It also means institutional adoption isn't a theory anymore. It's happening. When IPO proceeds are flowing through Ripple stablecoin on the XRP ledger, that's not retail speculation, that's institutional capital markets in motion. When Gemini, one of the top US exchanges, goes from ignoring XRP to promoting it with reward programs and direct financial ties to Ripple, that's a structural shift. And when Ripple is building compliance rails with TRM labs alongside banks moving trillions every month, it's clear we're talking about flows measured in trillions, not hype-driven retail pumps. And most importantly, it means you're holding an asset built for utility-driven growth. Not hype, not short-term cycles. Real growth anchored to real adoption. Every move Ripple has made, Beacon, Gemini, IPO settlements, is about making XRP unavoidable in the global financial system. That's why you need to pay attention when Ripple's head of stablecoins says, the floodgates are opening. They don't use that language lightly. They're telling you exactly what's happening. The rails are being built, the institutions are lining up, and XRP is being positioned as part of the backbone of the new financial system. If you're holding XRP, you're not just betting on price action. You're holding a stake in the infrastructure that's being woven into compliance, exchanges, and capital markets all at once. And that's why the smartest players aren't watching daily candles. They're watching announcements like these. The lawsuit days defined XRP's past. These moves define XRP's future. And that future is institutional. Ripple just detonated an XRP bombshell. And when you line up the pieces, Beacon Network, Gemini's pivot, IPO settlements, and Rust integration, the picture is undeniable. This isn't about speculation anymore. It's not about hype, rumors, or what might happen someday. This is about infrastructure being put in place right now. Beacon Network shows regulators and banks that crypto crime can be tracked and stopped in real time. Gemini proves that US exchanges are finally waking up to XRP's role, and Ripple's financial ties to them make that pivot impossible to ignore. IPO proceeds flowing through the XRP ledger prove that Ripple stablecoin isn't a concept. It's already being used at the highest levels of capital markets. Put it together and you see exactly what Ripple has been building toward for years: integration into the pipes of global finance. The floodgates aren't cracking open slowly. They're being forced wide open by adoption that can't be ignored. And here's the real question. Are you positioned before the tidal wave hits? Because when these systems go mainstream, when banks and exchanges and regulators are all using the same rails Ripple is building today, the opportunity to be early will be gone. This is why you need to stay locked in to be crypto smart. Because while most of the market is distracted by noise, we're tracking the real institutional moves, the announcements, the integrations, the shifts that separate long-term winners from everything else. XRP, XLM, HBAR. These aren't hype coins. These are infrastructure plays. So hit subscribe right now, because every week we're breaking down exactly how these pieces are coming together and where the next seismic move is likely to hit. The bombshell has dropped. The rails are being built. The floodgates are opening. Don't be the one standing outside when the money starts flowing through.